How to shop for plants for a food forest. I am going to make this video quick and full of information. My name is Nick. I build food forests, pollinator gardens for people with my company, Eternal Harvest. Check out my channel. But this video is about just the basic things you need to consider when you're shopping for plants for a food forest. How much should you prepare ahead of time, what plants you're going to get, versus see what they have in stock? How to shop across multiple nurseries and actually get the best deals, the best plants without wasting a bunch of time. Now, I spent 8 hours yesterday getting all these plants, and that's because a lot of the nurseries were all around the city. The traffic was horrible. And because I'm also in an unfamiliar location, I'm in a city where I'm not used to the ecology. And so I have to take the principles of food forestry, and it just takes a little more time. If I was in my city, I would already know what plants to get. I know what plants to get, it just takes a bit longer to figure out where to get them, which ones fill which ecological niches, layers of the forest. And so when you're building a food forest, shopping for plants, you're designing an ecosystem, right? So you're designing an ecosystem from forest to shrubs to ground cover that fills all these ecological niches so you can have a self-maintaining system. Now, let's just get into that. How do we take that and shop for plants? I'd say the biggest thing is the spectrum of either just going to the store and figuring it out versus preparation ahead of time. Now, if you live by a nursery, by all means, go there, see what plants they have, and just sit down. Maybe even bring a computer and think about what you're going to do as far as food forest design. How experienced are you with food forest design? If you don't have any experience, it can take a very long time to design a food forest, especially properly. You're probably going to miss out on some stuff anyways. That's why I do designs for people. I can build these, but I also can design it for you. Go to www.eternalharvestgardens.com, eternalharvestgardens.com. But I'm going to tell you here some basic stuff you need to know. If you are better at design, if you know how food forests work, obviously you can just go to a nursery and you can figure it out. You can say, oh, this plant does this plant does that. That's going to fit into my food forest. You obviously want to know what fruit trees you're getting ahead of time, but even that you can just figure out. So as far as how I did this, I knew what fruit trees I was going to get. Because I was in a new city, I familiarized myself. I researched what native plants there are, which ones do well in food forests, which ones are actually available in nurseries. And obviously, native plants are great because they're adapted to the climate. That's just a huge bonus. So many plants that we grow don't thrive because they're not adapted to the climate. They're from a different climate and they don't do as well. So you can go. What I did is I had a list of certain plants that I was like, oh, this would be good, but I knew what ecological niche it filled, and I could easily say, okay, this plant's not in stock, and this plant does the same thing. It's the same layer of the forest. It's also native. I could just put that in instead. And so I ended up getting maybe about half of the plants that I set out to get. I had a list of about 15 plants that would be good, and I got about the same ecological balance. I found some other plants that I didn't find online researching, and that's why it took me 8 hours yesterday, because I was really trying to make sure everything was in really good balance, getting all the right kinds of plants. I've got some pomegranates, some figs, and some pineapple guava, two of each. And so that was fun because in Minnesota, I don't get to plant these kind of things. That's where I live and usually build food forests. So got all those trees, got all the plants, and you just take a plant, you look at this plant, you say, okay, you can even use AI if you want, and you can say, okay, every plant I tell you, you can even send it a picture of like a bunch of tags and say, every plant that's here, give me the ecological niche, the layer of the forest, whether or not it's native. And obviously you want to make sure it's perennial. So I went to 3 nurseries. We'll get into that in a second. But yeah, just from there, you can see how everything fits into your food forest design. And you can find a new plant and be like, oh, this plant actually does a lot. It's easy to find a bunch of plants that are insectary, that are good for attracting beneficial insects, good for pollinators. That's not going to be hard. You want to find nitrogen fixers, biomass producers, dynamic accumulators, things that build soil, aromatic pest confusers. That's good. And you want to get a variety of pollinator attracting plants that flower throughout the season. So those are other things you can take into account. And obviously diversity is just going to handle a lot. But you can get a bunch of diversity. If they're all just pollinator plants, that's not a very good food forest. You want a balance of ecological niches. So yeah, as far as going to 3 different nurseries, obviously it depending on the size of the project. on how much you value your time versus money. It can make sense to go to like 3 different nurseries, especially if they're closer to each other. Spend time, scout out everything, even keep track in your notes, and then go to places where a certain plant is the cheapest, go to another place where a different plant is the cheapest. Get the pomegranate tree that's of the best variety. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, I went to this one nursery and they didn't have much in stock. The native plants they did have were $17 each. I was pissed off. $17 for a pot of native plants. I go to the other nursery, $3 a pot, and the plant is like, what, 75% as big. This other place, the plant was like 25% bigger, or I guess 75%. That would actually be like, we're not gonna do the math on that because then I'll think for like 20 seconds. But it's like if the plant's going to grow well, the plant's going to catch up in like a month or a couple weeks. If the plant's not going to grow well, then you're not going to make up for it by getting a bigger plant. If I was just getting one plant, then maybe I'll get the bigger one for $17. Woohoo. But when you're getting 100 plants, that's the difference between spending $1,700 and $300 on a certain plant. Obviously, some of these plants I got were $3. A couple of them were $2, and some of them were $50. It depends on the plant. But as far as like shopping them on different nurseries, that's just something you need to balance the pros and cons about. As far as how much to design ahead of time, just design more ahead of time if you want, and then you can change things when you're there. If you're doing your own food forest, you really want to put the time into doing it right. It's not something you want to mess up. It's well worth investing your time into over designing, over planning, overthinking than to build a food forest raw and then 3 years later have your whole ecosystem be out of function. You're building a mini ecosystem. You're building a self-maintaining ecological ecosystem here. So you want to be doing things right. Anyways, that's the video about my experience plant shopping. We're just going to put that out there. Like I said, go to my website, eternalharvestgardens.com. Check out my channel, and peace.